the science was right, it was going to be a terrible day.
It's coming for us.
And that storm is already through Smithville.
Boom.
People's houses and businesses. I mean, it's all gone. It's all gone.
If you drove past Smithville anytime from 2012 to 2020, you might have noticed this strange dent high on the town's water tower. At first glance, you could have mistaken this for a flaw in the steel, or even a quirk of design. But for everyone living in Smithville, this seemingly ordinary dent was an 8-year, horrific reminder of the monster that ripped straight through town on April 27, 2011. This dent was carved by a multi-ton SUV when it was hauled by an EF5 tornado to be slammed full speed into the steel structure. And despite hitting the tower with such unthinkable force, the tornado's winds were still so violent that this SUV was later found a quarter of a mile away from the tower, crumpled up like paper. This was the EF5 tornado that reduced Smithville to rubble on April 27, 2011. March to April of any given year is always tornado-prone in most parts of Dixie Alley.
Another area in the southeast that experienced their fair share of powerful tornadoes, and this hotspot is called Dixie Alley.
The second most tornado-active region in the world. This time of year is when atmospheric instability in the area peaks as the warm, moisture-rich air from the Gulf collides with the lingering cold air of winter. On top of that, upper-level troughs are more frequent, and jet streams are positioned right over Dixie Alley during this time. In other words, March to April is the short but violent time span when tornadoes are not just possible, but inevitable in states like Alabama, Tennessee, and Mississippi. Now, it's one thing for the atmosphere to have all the ingredients for a tornado, but it's an entirely different scenario for these ingredients to come together in their most volatile, explosive forms.
It is the most frustrating thing. We can see this violent rotation on radar, but we don't know if it's aloft or on the ground. We have no idea.
Because then, you go from having a tornado to having a tornado super outbreak capable of erasing multiple towns within minutes. For this exact reason, April 27, 2011 was feared even by meteorologists who track and chase violent tornadoes for a living.
We were really pushing it hard with this event due to all the ingredients coming together for violent killer tornadoes.
Because as this date drew closer, the probability of an outbreak that would be both historic and catastrophic became much harder to ignore.
As we got closer to Wednesday, April the 27th, those key ingredients were even more prominent. So I had not seen numbers like that ever before. Each consecutive model run kept getting worse. So I knew there was some validity to it. If the science was right, it was going to be a terrible day.
Unfortunately, even the best predictions from experts about how this outbreak might evolve were nowhere near what would actually unfold that day. Because on April 27, 2011, a record-breaking set of 225 tornadoes tore across the United States. And 4 of those were rated EF5, the strongest category a tornado can reach.
Oh my God.
Even when most years, the United States either sees one EF5 tornado or none at all. EF5s are supposed to be a rare breed of storm. In fact, there had recently been a 12-year drought of EF5s, with the previous EF5 occurring on May 20th, 2013, before another finally struck in June 2025. Unfortunately, however, the fear and urgency that meteorologists felt about this day didn't fully reach the average person. See, living in some of the most tornado-prone corners of the South is perhaps a very dangerous double-edged sword. On one hand, people here are mostly equipped with underground storm shelters, and most towns have adequate sirens to warn them of incoming storms. But on the other hand, tornado warnings in these areas are so common that upon hearing them, people don't exactly sprint to their shelters in pure terror anymore. On April 27, 2011, while there were people like Johnny Parker in Smithville who were keeping a close eye on the radar, news, and NWS updates, watching for even the slightest hint of tornadic activity. There were also people like Jimmy Cowley, who didn't really believe a tornado would come knocking unless he personally saw it outside his front door. Because of this, even when the wrathful tornadoes of April 27, 2011 started as early as 3:30 a.m. in other areas of Dixie Alley, for many people in Smithville, the day started like any regular Wednesday. Some people were preparing for church, others were at work. In fact, kids were still at school early in the day. But things took a turn as noon drew closer. The SPC issued a high-risk outlook, highlighting portions of Alabama and Mississippi with up to a 45% chance of violent tornadoes and significant hail as early as 11:30 a.m. And later, tornado watches were issued, including the first known particularly dangerous situation tornado watch with over 95% probability for all hazards, which included tornadoes, hail, and severe winds. Every local TV network was overtaken by wall-to-wall weather coverage, and every meteorologist was essentially saying the same thing. Take this seriously. Take cover. Do not go outside.
Everyone into a bunker, please, immediately. There is a tornado heading this way.
You should have been in your safe place 20 minutes ago.
Going to be hit by the storm, make sure you're taking shelter immediately.
You'll need to go to a more substantial shelter. But if by chance you're hearing me at the last minute on the radio, get into a safe place right now.
But believe it or not, many in Smithville did not exactly have access to these types of coverage. Some didn't have cable or weather radios, and others simply weren't tuned in.
We dove in the hallway, and me and my son-in-law sat down on the bottom of the stairs, and the debris started coming down the stairs, and a piece hit me in the back.
Again, many had already started their day like it was any other weekday. But on the bright side, the town had another unique way of staying informed about dangerous weather updates. 16-year-old Johnny Parker, who had earned the trust of locals for knowing when it was really time to take shelter. Since September of 2010, he had been running a text-based forecasting service for the local community, sending out alerts and updates whenever severe weather threatened Monroe County. As the day progressed, Johnny was all eyes on the radar, just like the professional meteorologists were. And, as feared, the weather only got worse. By 2:30 p.m., the tornado that would become the first EF5 of the day touched down near Philadelphia, Mississippi.
Oh my God, look at the debris!
About 30 minutes later, another tornado, later rated EF3, touched down near the community of New Wren, Mississippi. It became infamous for hurling a vehicle roughly 1.7 miles, the farthest verified distance a vehicle has ever been thrown by a tornado. At about 3:30 p.m., a second siren sounded across Smithville.
I got on my police radio and I alerted the Smithville Town Hall for all employees to get to their safe place.
And just 12 minutes later, at 3:42 p.m., the same supercell that spawned the New Wren tornado produced what would soon become the EF5 Smithville tornado, often regarded as the most intense and devastating tornado of the entire super outbreak. From the wall cloud, this particular tornado drilled into the soil at exactly 3:43 p.m. in an open area just 3 miles away from Smithville. During its first minute, the twister inflicted very little damage beyond broken branches and scattered debris. But when it reached the ground about 300 yards west of Caldwell Branch, it ramped up in strength so rapidly that the ground scouring became immediately visible. By this point, it went from stripping bark off trees to completely clearing out a dense patch of forest in its path. Around 3:44 p.m., just 2 minutes after touchdown, the tornado's intensity briefly weakened as its core collapsed. But this pause only lasted a few seconds, almost serving as the calm before the storm that fueled a burst of violent re-intensification, allowing the winds to reach well over 200 miles per hour within seconds.
Oh my God! This is crazy! energy!
More specifically, it went from EF0 to EF5 strength in just 6 seconds. This burst of strength was so powerful that the tornado carved a trench-like scar over a foot deep into the topsoil in less than a second. While only the aftermath can hint at how powerful the tornado truly was in that moment up close, this was also when the first distant videos of the now EF5 Smithville tornado were recorded, revealing the growing, churning mass that it had become just seconds after it re-intensified. Seeing updates that a massive wedge has been seen just 2 miles from town, 16-year-old Johnny Parker sent his most urgent message of the day to everyone subscribed to his text-based weather forecast. Get to a safe place now. By this point, the tornado was maintaining violent EF5 intensity, and within moments, it obliterated a bed and breakfast, sweeping it completely from its foundation and scattering its remains across nearby fields. This tragedy marked the first of 23 fatalities that would occur along the tornado's 37-mile path. As the tornado continued northeast, more homes, vehicles, and structures were destroyed. A semi-truck nearby was thrown about 300 yards, and an RV that was tossed 250 yards was partially buried in the ground. A second semi-truck in the same area was torn apart entirely. Only its bumper, which was found hanging from the Smithville water tower that's more than a mile away, was ever recovered. The tornado continued, and so did the destruction. A brick home nearby was reduced to its foundation, metal buildings were torn apart, and 14 mobile homes were destroyed so thoroughly that their frames were twisted into unrecognizable shapes. It's also around this time when the Ford Explorer that would later become symbolic of the storm's terrifying wind speeds was lifted into the air. The SUV traveled half a mile before slamming into the Smithville water tower, leaving behind the dent that would mark the town's nightmares for years. Despite hitting the tower at insane speed, the vehicle still flew another quarter mile before hitting the ground, proving just how incomprehensibly violent and unforgiving the Smithville tornado truly was. As the tornado entered the heart of Smithville, it reached its maximum intensity. Homes and businesses were wiped from their foundations in seconds. Crucial community establishments, including the city hall, post office, police station, and several churches with people inside, all vanished in the same sweep.
It was just like an explosion went off. It was immediate and it was fast. After it passed over, houses were gone, trees were gone, and I just told my brother that I don't see how anybody could have survived this much destruction.
You didn't have to look to see it because you could feel the ground shaking and hear the roar of it coming.
Even the town's medical clinic was torn apart.
People's houses and businesses, I mean, it's all gone. It's all gone.
I mean, it's terrifying to look at it, and it's terrifying to know what could have been. But all you can do is just thank the good Lord that you're alive, you know? That's pretty much all you can do.
There is little to no footage of people experiencing the horrors of that afternoon while they were happening. But many survivors have since stepped forward to share their stories with journalists.
I couldn't compare it to nothing that I've ever seen in my lifetime. My dad's 41, he said he couldn't compare it to nothing in his lifetime. It was bad. It was terrifying.
And it's only by telling these stories that we get even a small step closer to doing justice to what the people of Smithville endured. Jimmy Cowley, for example, who was a skeptic of tornado watches and warnings, recalled how his truck was thrown and rolled while he was driving on the highway. By the time he saw the massive dark wedge closing in behind him, it was already too late. He was lifted into the air, suffering severe head lacerations from flying debris, before being thrown back to the ground. He survived, but with deep emotional trauma. Brandy Holloway, who was working as a waitress over at Mel's Diner, was caught off guard when her boss called and told her to close up and take cover in the walk-in cooler. She was skeptical of the warning at first, but with some convincing, she and the 12 others in the diner hid inside the cooler. When the violent tornado finally passed, they stepped out to find that the diner was just completely gone, and only the cooler remained.
This is what we hid in to get away from the tornado and get into some safety. My daughters were screaming, and I could hear my wife praying, and I grabbed the door. That was my job, was to hold that door shut.
Carla Jones, an aunt babysitting 3 children, died shielding them with her body in a bathtub. Her niece would later honor her aunt's sacrifice during her high school graduation in May of 2025.
It just looked like a bunch of darkness, dark clouds like rolling at him, and it was loud. It was like, imagine somebody screaming at the top of their lungs into like your ear, and it would like burst your eardrums. I think I'd definitely say thank you to her for taking her own life to help us as kids.
Ruth Estes, a blind elderly woman who was ripped from the arms of her husband, Roy Lee Estes, as their home disintegrated. Ruth was never seen alive again, and Roy passed away later that night after his heart gave out. Alongside Holmes, and as unbelievable as it sounds, people, a 1965 Chevrolet pickup from one of the damaged homes was also lifted and never recovered. Other vehicles were found in almost surreal states, such as being wrapped around trees or shredded down to their bare frames. Anything and everything the tornado could rip, it did. And it wasn't just the wind that was violent, but the pressure itself. As proven by this now infamous photograph showing curtains being pulled outward through a house's tiny gap between the ceiling and the wall. In Itawamba County, the E.E. Pickle Funeral Home, a large brick structure, was reduced to a clean slab. Tombstones in the adjacent cemetery were also knocked over or scattered in different directions. Around this point, the tornado began to lose some of its strength, but the destruction continued. North of Smithville, the tornado tore through farmland, uprooting trees and power lines before crossing the state line into Alabama. Very briefly, the twister weakened to an EF1 near Bexar, but as it approached the rural community of Scottsville, it strengthened again, reaching high-end EF3 intensity. Both well-built homes and mobile homes were destroyed there, and 7 additional lives were lost. The tornado continued northeast, causing more high-end EF3 damage near Hamilton and Franklin County, before finally dissipating near Hodges at around 4:23 p.m., just over 40 minutes after it first touched down. The Smithville EF5 tornado carved a deadly path, 37 miles long and 3/4 of a mile wide, killing 23 people and injuring more than 130. 17 of those fatalities occurred in Smithville alone during the tornado's devastating 3-minute stay.
The tornado was actually a half a mile wide, and our town limits is probably 1 mile wide. It took out half of our town. I didn't think that anybody, even in the town, would survive it.
You know, when you see the chief of police and you see that he's scared, you know it's serious. You just didn't know what to do. You didn't know what to say.
Like many other communities affected on April 27, 2011, getting back up to anything resembling normal life was an incredibly difficult feat for the people of Smithville and the nearby towns hit by this EF5 tornado. It took time and collective healing, but eventually, the people in the community managed to rebuild.
Almost every home on this highway was leveled. This town is just destroyed.
Right.
My heart has been so heavy for everyone. I can't imagine this kind of loss.
With help and assistance from the American Red Cross, as well as a long-term community recovery team from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Smithville began to build back stronger and smarter. And this served not only as a plan, but also as a ray of hope for everyone hurt, traumatized, or left with nothing after the tornado.
We all experienced our weakest moment when all the material possessions were stripped away and you realized you had maybe someone that you loved to still hold on to.
One way or another, the effects and memories of the Smithville EF5 tornado remained deeply rooted in the community for years, The water tower that was struck and dented by the SUV, hurled by the tornado, remained standing until it was replaced by a more modern, upgraded water tank in 2020. And even now, if you look at Street View images of Smithville on Google Maps, you can still see the concrete slabs where homes once stood, but have remained untouched since April 27, 2011. Still, not every reminder of this tornado is grim or tragic. On April 27, 2024, exactly 13 years after the EF5 tornado brought unimaginable destruction to the town, the Smithville community gathered at the corner of Monroe and Elm Streets to celebrate something profoundly meaningful. Because while the tornado left scars that will never fully fade, one teenager's courage and quick thinking saved countless lives that day. The town came together to honor Johnny Parker, the 16-year-old whose text-based weather alerts warned dozens of residents to take cover just before the tornado hit. And on that anniversary, Smithville unveiled a new street sign, Johnny Parker Street, a celebration that perfectly showcased how Smithville may be a small town, but it carries the biggest of hearts for everyone who has ever called it home.
No, it's never easy losing anyone. It's a struggle, not just April the 24th or April the 27th. If it wasn't for the love and support of the community, couldn't get through every day.